Hello, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Caroline horse Biggie. However, this is from her first submission a little while back, and what we're going to see is there's a huge change in this horse from this submission to the second one. We can see here, we can still see how tense the underside of his neck is there, how completely dropped his back is there. You can see how his hips are very peaked, all of which are, of course, signs that he's never really been working over his back. And even there you see how when she uses her whip, he throws his head up and even hollows a little bit more there for a moment. And now we come to what he looks like now, and I think we can already see a huge difference in him. This is really good, starting to walk out, how much more regular his walk has become. So this is all really good work. Now Caroline writes to me and she asks sometimes she has a difficult time getting him to step under and step over in the lateral movement rather than just going in a straight line. And if you have a horse that's really problematic with that, what you can do is just stand a little bit in front of their shoulder there a little bit, and then just ask him to tap him on the side and ask him to move away from you and just get the idea to move away from you like that. So in other words, you block his forward movement there a little bit by just getting in front of him a little bit, to just give him a little tap where your leg would be and get him to step over a little bit. That's usually a good way to get them started for horses that have just learned to push into you, for instance. So try that a little bit next time and see if that doesn't help you out. That is, just kind of place yourself a little bit in front of the shoulder, almost in front of the horse, but not quite. And then just reach over and tap him with the whip. And that's kind of what happens there as he kind of spins around you in a circle there. We'd like to see him step over a little bit more. But how much better this stretch is. This horse already looks so much better in this video than he did in the first one. And of course, there's always the issue of bringing your inside rein up a little bit when he tries to run into you. So just like lift your hand up on the inside rein so he can't bear down on you, and then just tap him with the whip a little bit. That would be the way to solve that problem. But some horses can be quite difficult at that if they've learned to kind of push on people. So once again, placing yourself in front of them a little bit. You can even do it alongside of a wall, for instance, where you reverse the position. In other words, instead of going on the inside, you'd be on the outside so he can't push his hindquarters. You can kind of face him at the rail a little bit, and then just ask him to step over. Once they get the idea the first couple of times, it becomes pretty easy. See how you're doing there, just lifting your inside hand? That's the right thing to do, and you get a couple of steps over. That's exactly, you did it just right there. That's exactly what you would want to do, and just gradually begin to ask for a little more of that sideward movement. Because remember, we're never going to get the back placed exactly where we want in most cases until we get the horse to step under the middle of the body. Remember, in the work in hand, we're always trying to find that place where we get him to step under enough and find just the right place at the right angle. As the horse pushes off that inside hind leg, it will push the back up a little bit, and it will tend to, as the back pushes up, to push the neck out, and you'll feel the horse wanting to go forward into your hand a little bit. Now, I suppose that was an attempt to get him to step over a little bit more, but what you'd want to do, even if you have to come to a standstill for a second, just to get him the idea just to step over, that's perfectly all right to do once or twice. Obviously, we want to get to the point where we can maintain rhythm. Now, look how good this walk is as he starts to stretch out there. That's even much, much better yet. There, and quite good there. You get a little bit. So just keep trying for a little bit more and a little bit more of that leg yield position rather than just going in a straight line. It won't be long before you'll have it. But we can clearly already see a lot of body changes in this horse from the first video. So there, those circles, you're not really getting enough step over. So even, once again, if you even have to slow him down, even come to a stop, till he just understands to just step over rather than run straight ahead. Because that's the point that you really need to. Now right there, see, you start to do that. You raise your inside hand, and he steps over. Now that's quite good for, now, of course, you're doing the right thing. As soon as you come back to that, and just reestablish that big swinging walk. So it's perfectly all right if we lose the rhythm once in a while, but if we realize, then we have to put him right back into the rhythm if we do lose it. Once again, as I said, when we lose all rhythm, then we just have to sort of start again and reestablish that forward swing. But it's quite natural for horses that have learned to kind of lean into you and want to push into you for them to try that. And as I said, the first step is just getting them to step over a little bit more. So even if you have to stop and just ask him simply to step over and block him a little bit with your body, that's perfectly all right to do until you get him stepping through a little bit more and under so that you can control the stretch a little bit more. Now, you can certainly do a lot by just going in a straight line if the horse will stretch as he's doing. So this is improving slowly. So you're definitely on the right track. You just need to get that step a little bit more. I would, instead of letting him spin around me, as I said, I would just come to a standstill for a moment and then just tap him to move over sideways and try to get a few steps sidewards. All good rhythm here. And also remember that work in hand can be a fairly difficult exercise. There, a couple of steps there. And that was better, and just what you're doing that. I like how you did that rather than let him spin around you in a small circle, just getting faster. That really doesn't help much. But what you did right there was very good. You slowed him down, you got a little step over, and then you sent him on forward again, just exactly what you should do. So we're always trying to get that next step, get a little deeper. We're always trying to push the envelope of the horse, trying to get something a little better every day. But always with that rule is if we lose the rhythm, then we have to go back and reestablish that, and then just simply try again. But you're doing a very good job with this. And also remember that work in hand is a very difficult technique. I know when people watch me do it, I've been doing this for 40 years, so it looks pretty easy. But you're all doing a great job of getting the hang of this, and it isn't just like riding. And it's really a great adjunct to teaching someone to ride, because you really have to focus on what you're doing and the correct kind of contact with the horse's mouth before you're really going to get much done. So this really helps the rider develop their feel for the horse before they even get on the back of the horse and understand the basic principles by which we ride. That is, the horse must move forward active and come underneath itself from the touch of the leg. So that's just what we're teaching it here. Once we can actually get a horse to do that, this is the hardest thing other than having the patience to wait for the horse to develop, really in all of riding. Because if you haven't developed that supple contact, all you're going to be doing is pulling on the mouth of the horse when you try to adjust the frame. Once again, that was more of a spin around in a circle. I'd like to see a little more step over. So those kind of circles don't have a lot of value there. You'd want to bring them back, once again. It'd be better to just stop them a little bit and ask him to step over, get him understanding the idea to step over rather than just spinning around you in a circle. Good rhythm here. I like how watching you there, you can see how your legs are moving at about the same speed as the horses, and that's about as they should, and taking the same length of stride. There, now that's really quite good. He's obviously a little easier about this on this side, but that was really a good little step over there. Good leg yield. And you did just the right thing there as he came to the corner. You could see how he tried to slow down. And you just relaxed the reins and sent him on forward. This is exactly what you do when you ride. We just never want to oppose the aids, and that's the big thing for people to get. Now, this work in hand is really good for people, as I said, to develop their contact, because you can't just hold against the horse's mouth here. It's actually easier to do that on the back of a horse because you're moving with him. Whereas here, if you tried to really hang on and pull the horses down, head down, as so many people do from the back of the horse, you'd find the horse pretty soon charging through your hands, and if you weren't in balance, you could easily find yourself flat on the ground, so to speak, as the horse pulls you off your feet. But you have good posture when you're doing this, and that's a very important aspect of this, that we keep ourselves four square on our own 2 feet, so the horse can not pull us off of the ground with his 4 feet. Same thing is true of lunging, of course. We always must stand up straight and be sure we have a firm feel of the ground, so to speak, and good posture, so the horse can't pull us off of our feet. Also why it's so important to be physically fit when we do this. You can imagine how exhausting this would be, even just to do this walk around as you're doing here, if you weren't fit enough to do it. I would almost say that would be a good caveat. You know, if you're not fit enough to work a horse in hand, you're probably not fit enough to ride it. Now, once again, that circle's just a little bit, you're not really getting what you want there, which is to get him to move over a little bit. So in the course of all that, you need to ask him to, just like you're doing a leg heel on the circle, think of it that way. As you start on a small circle, that might be a good way for you to start. Is take him to a small circle, but then ask him to move over and move away. And let the large circle, just like when we lunge, become kind of the reward, so to speak. When the horse isn't doing what we want on the lunge, we don't jerk on the horse's mouth, we simply bring it onto a smaller circle until it relaxes again, then we let it back out again. So the small circle is more like, a lot more effort for the horse to make. So we reward them as soon as they give and stretch by letting them right back out onto a larger circle. Now that's a good stretch there. Now that's starting to come really nicely. Now he lost a little bit of rhythm there, but you did get a little deeper stretch. It can also be very difficult from side to side. And remember, when we talk about straightness with the horse, so we're always talking about getting the horse over its back. That's what allows a horse to be straight. So that's why this work is so important, and it solves all of the other problems that we encounter with riding. You know, when horses are difficult to ride, when they're hard in the mouths, all these kinds of things, they always have their origins in the back. I don't really believe that horses' mouths become hard. I think they just become so hollow in their back and they become rigid against the hand because they can't flex the poll or relax the jaw correctly. So we can see how the more we get the horse to stretch, all the things that people are trying to do with their horses, getting them to engage underneath and collect, all becomes easy and possible. Now you can see there how he slowed down a little bit as you went to do that lateral work. But it got a little better here. You're keeping the shoulder in a little bit there. So here it's getting, see how you're beginning to walk in front of the horse here? That tells me that you need to tap him with your whip a little bit and get him a little more active and come more up to your hand there. But really that work in hand is going very, very well. You're well on your way. Just once again, try to get a little more forward step. I wouldn't do those small spin circles unless you can really slow it down and get him to move over. But I think with this horse, you need to just kind of block him a little bit a few times. And as I said, just start from the halt rather than trying to do it from the walk and just get him to understand to step that leg under a little bit. And once he understands that, the rest of that will get easier. But that's a huge improvement of what we saw, as is this lunging, just coming into the lunging right away, stretching down where we saw in that last little clip of him how hollow he was throughout all of that. But you've already made really good changes in this horse's body. I mean, if you put the two clips together, obviously he's a little darker here, and then he's grown his winter coat out a little bit. But he looks very different here than he did in the last video. He looked very, very tight, very hollow and tight to the back. And here he's stretching really quite nicely. Always remembering that even if you can just get the stretch in the walk, you're going to be doing a great deal to help the horse. You can develop a lot of muscle in doing nothing but the walk. Always remember when you're rehabbing horses. Horses even have the slightest bit of being off, so to speak, or irregular. Just keep them in the walk until you get the walk right. And then when you go back to the trot work, it will be a lot better and more consistent. So always remembering to get one thing at the same time. Just like, we had education reform some years back. We used to have the school systems here in America that just passed kids from grade to grade, no matter whether they're prepared or not, just to pass them through high school in these lower grades. And we ended up with tons of students going to college who couldn't read and write. So the same thing's true of your horse. You want to learn one thing at a time. Get one thing correct and then move on to the next thing. And that's very true in the walk, of just getting him over his back in the walk, as you have done a good job of doing relative to what he can do. And we can see how he starts off here a little bit slow and a little bit hollow. But that's looking really good there. And as she said he slowed down quite a bit. Well, yes, he has. He's stepping much more deeply under his body in this video than he was in the last one. So he's beginning to take longer, more efficient strides rather than just running in very tiny little short, tight strides. Now, once in a while, we have horses that we need to make more active. And always remember, when I say active, I mean the horse is beginning to activate itself rather than forward. Remember, forward comes when we can get a horse to go forward. Forward means to engage forward into the body. But at first, with some horses, we just have to get them active. In other words, before they're really over their backs, we just have to get them a little more active than they want to be, just to get enough activity for the right things to begin to happen. So we want the horse to end up being forward, but in the beginning, sometimes we just have to make them active, if that makes sense. So the horse is not really forward until it's over its back, no matter how fast it's going. That's the biggest misconception that we've seen in dressage, or one of, over the last couple of decades, is that people not really understanding even what the terminologies mean, or confusing them with something else, like running around the arena as fast as you can go is not going forward. Forward means to engage forward into the body. And she asked here, it's perfectly all right to have a few strides of canter, just don't do it for very long. Obviously this canter, it's not terrible, it's just not disunited in running, but it's still quite hollow and not really getting through the back. But if it makes him a little more active, that's okay to do little short periods like that. A lot of horses are like that. They come back, the canter gets them a little more energized, so to speak, and then we come back and we get a good trot. You just wouldn't want to do that for very long. But how much better a trot you get here after the canter. So that's perfectly fine to do. In other words, she just made him a little more active, and then she came back to the trot, and then she got a more forward trot. That is, the horse engaging more forward underneath itself. But remember, when we talk about that, there's a point with every horse that if we go too fast, that is inertia, that is the mass of the horse's body moving through space, is going to drive the horse onto the forehand. So we never want to go too fast. There's always a fine line there with almost any horse. So in other words, the weight of their own body will push them onto the forehand after a certain speed, just like a train, how hard it is to slow down. It sort of develops this momentum. But that was much improved after that little canter work. And you can see how here he's going a little bit. I want you to work a little bit closer to him at this point. You can see how he's going with the shoulders outside the circle of the hindquarters. So I'd work a little closer to him there and ask him to yield the hindquarters, just like you do in the work in hand. And that's often why we do the work in hand. We go to lunge a horse and we find they just have no concept of moving away from us, which is the most basic element. Remember when we talk about natural horsemanship, for instance, the most natural thing when it comes to a horse being trained is that it is submissive to you in that basic elemental sense that the horse will move its hindquarters away from you, which is just what horses do if you watch them in nature. When one horse comes up, the alpha horse, and the other one swings around, well, the other one threatens it, it backs down and yields its hindquarters. Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. So nothing could be closer to how actually horses respond to one another. That's why lunging is so important, lets you establish those things. And of course, it keeps you out of the strike zone, whereas horses, even them, you'll notice how rarely will they come up and kick each other, actually. They'll spin their hindquarters, but usually it's out of range. But once in a while, if a horse really wants to make an impression, then they get a little closer where they can load their guns against their opponent, so to speak, a little more. But just getting them to yield that hindquarters is the first basic element of control. I watched a person just a couple of days ago, someone who was supposed to be starting a horse, and they were in this round pen with this horse for at least a couple of hours, going through all these things, but never really getting the things that they really needed, was to get the horse to yield. They were tying them up in all kinds of tie downs and things like this, trying to do something to the frame, I guess. And then all of this body contact work that we see people trying to do. The only thing you want a horse to do relative to your body is to simply yield away from you. That's basically it. We don't want them to join up with us. Unfortunately, when horses join up with us, they might just join up with your head with one of their hooves, which is not what we want. So with young horses, it's so important. As I said, when I train a young horse, I just go to where it is, I take it right to where I'm going to work it, and I take it right back to where it lives if it's just getting started, rather than trying to make it go through all of these other things. I just establish that control of the horse moving away from the hindquarters. And then gradually, that's what I would do before I would ever try to put horses in cross ties and that sort of thing. And as soon as I get them to lunge correctly, what you find is that all of these problems that you had of the horse standing still and all these kinds of things all just disappear by themselves without you being so close to the horse that you put yourself in the danger zone. Then once a horse will yield its body to you, that is, it will become a little more submissive, just like horses do in the wild, or even if they're not wild, out in pasture with each other. You see how they'll threaten each other with their hindquarters, and one horse will back down, or they'll go at it and sometimes hurt each other. But it's more likely that most of the time horses the horses kind of know their place in the pecking order. Now, however, you put a couple of stallions out, they're going to fight to the death, obviously, because it's so important to them to be the alpha, so to speak. So one has to take all of that in consideration when we work horses. In other words, we must think like they think. But that basic element of submission, of just yielding the hindquarters, is the start of everything, getting the horse to understand and relax and do what it is that you want to do. Because he goes, oh, okay, you're the boss. Now I've submitted my hindquarters, so I'm ready to, and pliable enough to now work and do something constructive. So here we come back to this walk, and this is looking much better here. Still a little on the slow side. Now that's where I'd like you to get a little closer and walk with the horse a little more so that you can be close enough where if you need to run the lash out, like when you have a horse like this is going too slow, you have to be close enough to touch the horse with the whip. Remember, we never want to crack the whip at a horse. That just usually annoys the horse, but very soon the horse will realize that a cracking whip doesn't do anything at all unless you touch the horse with the whip occasionally, so it understands what the actual whip has the potential to do, so to speak. And then it's rare that we have to touch them much with it. But with the ones that are going a little bit too slow, it's better if we get up closer to them so we can walk with them in a sense that we can run the lash out almost a little more like, you're not really working in hand, but you're working closer to the horse enough that you can tap them. Good walk here, a little bit too slow, but I like the stretch. I'd rather have the stretch in a little too slow a gait than have it be too fast and just running. As I said, there's always a speed at which if you go too fast, it's going to push the horse onto its forehand and actually keep it from engaging. So learning to find what that optimal stride is on any given day is one of the most important things you'll ever learn. What is enough? When is enough enough, so to speak? But I do like how stretching this horse is. And once again, if you go back and look at the top line previously of the last video that you did, this is a huge improvement. It's just his overall physique, his overall willingness to swing. He was always kind of, in the last video, he looked like a horse with the brakes on most of the time. So now at least it looks like the brakes are off. The engine isn't working all the way up to speed yet, but at least there's nothing impeding its forward motion anymore. And going back to the trot here, how nicely he stayed down into the stretch for you. As we've seen with people that are beginning to be aware of this and posting some photos, you see some of these horses that they're posting and they've turned them out and they're actually going around the ring round with their head stretched down. That's actually the way nature intended horses to move. And once they learn it, they'll want to move this way because it feels comfortable for them. I mean, just like anything else, if you've been struggling with your whole life or something, and all of a sudden it's easy and the physical impediments to whatever you're trying to do are out of the way, it becomes easy and it becomes a lot more fun. And it will actually become the natural way of moving, is my point here, is that this is how nature intended them to move, and they will move this way, just like nature intended them to eat off the ground. The worst things you can ever do for a horse's physique is to feed them out of mangers or hay nets that are tied up high where they have to eat like a giraffe with their head up in the air. Which also impedes their digestion, by the way, of course, because if their head is way up in the air, their belly is dropped, and that means there's nothing supporting their abdominal wall, which means that it's not absorbing or it's not massaging, so to speak, the internal organs. This is what helps a horse keep free and moving through its bowels. Any horse with his belly hanging down is going to have a lot more chance of colicking than one that is not. Good activity right there. That's really good. So for this horse, you've made a huge improvement in him since the last video. You're right on track. And just these little pointers that I'm giving you should help you just improve a little bit what you've done there. But you're right on track with all of this. Notice as the deeper he stretches, the more swing we get underneath the body. Like right there, immediately you see the hocks beginning to make a rounder circle. So one of the things we always want to look at is what the hocks are doing. Like right there, he's still a little slow, so the ellipse, that is the movement of his hock, is a little bit up and down and not as round yet as it could be. When the horse is well over its back, if you put a white dot, for instance, in the middle of the horse's hock, you'll see it almost making a perfect circle. Where if the horse is hollow, it will make an ellipse one way or the other. That'll either be an oval, that is, an oval that goes side to side, or an oval that goes up and down. We see so many upper-level horses these days, and if you look at them when they do their piaffe and passage and things like this, where they should be lowering the hindquarters, they're actually lifting the back end and kind of popping off of it. That's what happens when a horse is hollow in the back. It can't complete the stride through the back. So the energy is wasted by just going up and down rather than bringing the horse more forward. That is, forward underneath itself so it can stabilize the position of its back. And once again, after that canter, this horse gets a little more active, quite a bit more active. There, and just by virtue of that, we see the hock is starting to move a little better. It's more like what we want. We'd like to see him stretching down. There we go, like that. So that's a huge improvement over what we saw before. And always remember, like, I reward everything that the horse does better than it's done before, and often just stop. So if I come out and my plan is to do one thing, but the horse comes out and, is more over its back or gives me a little more collection than it has before. In other words, as soon as it shows me that it has improved on something, I'm going to stop. It's very rare that a horse needs an hour-long session. A half hour to 45 minutes is about the right time for a workout for a horse, or a human being, by the way. Studies have shown that when you work out longer than that, whether you're a horse or a human, you begin to lose muscle tone rather than gain it. And comes back to another pretty good walk. It's a little slow there, but you're doing just the right thing. Get that activity in the canter. Don't do it for very long, just enough to get a little more active. That is, remembering that difference between active and forward, so that you can ultimately get the horse to go forward. That is, to engage forward underneath the body. So just the way you approach that was just right. For his level of development, he's come a huge way since what we saw in the last video. So really good work. So at the point at which you can get on and you can get this stretch in the walk, then you're ready to start riding. If you get on and you can't get the stretch in the walk, don't bother. Just get back off if you can't get the stretch within a few minutes. That's kind of my rule of thumb, though. Do I need to lunge my horse or not? Well, if I can get on my horse and get it to stretch within a few minutes of being on it and relax, then I don't need to do the lunge work. If I can't do that, it's going to take me a half an hour just to even get anywhere with the horse, then I would say the lunging is more important. And of course, that you've all noticed now that you're lunging correctly, lunging does not hurt a horse when it's done correctly. I mean, you're basically working on a 20-meter circle and working towards relaxation. I mean, how many so-called trainers I'd see would say, oh, well, you're lunging on this small circle, you shouldn't lunge them. And then they'll watch the lesson that they give, and that's on a 10-meter circle, just going around endlessly on a 10-meter circle with a rider on its back. So, which really hurts the horse. Horses get hurt lunging when they run around like lunatics, and when people use lunging to wear horses down instead of to teach them something. Because if we only use lunging for wearing them down, they just get fitter and fitter, and it takes longer and longer. So if you're doing this correctly, it takes less and less time to get the lunge, to the point where my more advanced horses, they simply come out, they stretch right to the ground and go. Literally, lunging takes 5 minutes in each direction. That's kind of what your ultimate goal is. When you have that, you're pretty ready to ride the horse. You can still see how right there the back end's kind of falling out behind him. Once you get an eye for watching the back end of the horse instead of the head and neck, you'll begin to have more effective and efficient workouts, because you're always working towards getting the horse to work through and up through the back. And it's not, like for instance, if you couldn't get this here at the trot, which you're getting pretty good now, you just come back to a walk and work there. But you're getting enough of the right thing that you're doing just the right thing. So this is a huge improvement over what we saw. keep working towards what you're doing here. It's just getting better compared to what we saw in the first video a while back. This is a huge improvement. I like how there you did just the right thing. It was a little hollow in that trot, so you just came right back to the walk and continued in the walk. But that's what we want to do. We want to take as few steps badly as we possibly can. So great work. This is Will Faber from Art to Ride here. Really look forward to seeing this horse develop. You've done a really good job up to here. And once again, so many of you are out there working on your own with only the help of these videos. And now you know you have our associate trainers that you can get help from at any time you like. So we're trying to make this information available to everyone in the world, whether you can afford $300 lessons or not. We're trying to make it possible for everyone to train their horses correctly. This is Will Faber from Art to Ride. Really good job here. I look forward to the next one.